currently our federal co-chair is Matt Graves, who is the U.S. Attorney. And so the membership of the CJCC really is all of the executive branch, both local and district, judicial branch, and legislative branch entities that have a public safety responsibility. So our members have identified 4 priority areas. They're violent crime, juvenile justice, substance abuse and mental health, and incarceration and community corrections. And so we say we have 4 core functions. We as the agency, how we support our members to really serve the District of Columbia. We facilitate automated information sharing. So there's 30 plus criminal justice and public safety agencies in the district. We help them share information and exchange information from their various records management systems. The second thing we do is we conduct research and analysis. So we're the home of the district's Statistical Analysis Center, and so we monitor public safety and crime trends here in the district. The next thing we do is facilitate interagency collaboration. At any point in time, we have about 15 committees that are doing work across those 4 priority areas that I mentioned. And then the last thing we do is provide training and technical assistance. And so we do that 2 ways. The first is webinars. So several times a year, we'll bring in subject matter experts and host a webinar just so we can talk about and hear what other jurisdictions are doing, hear what the research says to help us address some of the public safety issues we face here in the district. And then the second form of training and technical assistance are our public meetings. And like I said, the purpose of these public meetings is to help give an opportunity for the public to engage with our criminal justice system leaders and really understand how the system works. All right, so with that, I'm gonna welcome our 2 panelists today. And first we have Mr. Victor Valentine Davis, and he is an Assistant Director for Defender Engagement for the Pretrial Services Agency. So we're so glad to have him here today. And then to my right, we have Mr. Marcus Hodges, who's the Associate Director at the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency, SOSA. And so we have pre-trial here and we have post-conviction here. So we're going to hear from both of them. They're going to take about 10 minutes or so, give us kind of the nuts and bolts, the 101 of their operations. After that, I'm going to have maybe a couple of questions for them. But like I said, this is a public meeting, so then we're going to open the floor. So there will be a mic available. You have an opportunity to pose your questions for those who are here in person. If you're online and if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Someone's going to send your questions to me, and I'll take a look, and I'll make sure I share the questions with our panelists today. All right, and a couple of logistic items to do. In your chairs, you have a survey. We do, again, this is for the public, this is for you. We want to know what you think of this session. We want your feedback. Please take a couple of moments to make sure you fill out the survey. And then around the room, and I think maybe at our registration table as well, you see paper with QR codes. And so please take a moment. That's our way of doing registration, just to see who came. And if you want to be notified about our future events, you can check a box and we'll be sure to add you to our distribution list. So when you get a moment, if you could scan the QR code and fill out a very brief survey. And I think for those who are online through our registration, I think we may have your information, and my team will tell me otherwise if there's another way. All right, so with that, I think we're going to start with you, Mr. Davis. If you could just share with us just kind of the overview of the Pretrial Services Agency.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So the Pretrial Services Agency for the District of Columbia is an independent federal agency that in the district supports both the local and federal court, providing risk assessments on individuals and giving support information on individuals that have been arrested, and then actually doing the supervision on any individual that's released on conditions prior to trial here in the district. One of the functions that we do, we are a 24/7 law enforcement agency, and we have teams that support the other 21 law enforcement jurisdictions, providing information on adults who have been stopped and or get arrested on what we call a criteria for citation release. Individuals that work in the agency will go back and do a detailed criminal history search on any individual and provide a recommendation and give the law enforcement agency that has done the arrest information on whether or not an individual is eligible to be released on citation or whether they need to carry on through lockup and see a judge. It is ultimately the decision of the law enforcement agency, but that's one of the parts of the things that the agency does. If the individual does not get released on citation and they get through lockup, the other part of what the agency does is we will go ahead and start what we call the diagnostic process. We have officers that work in the courthouse. Again, they do a criminal history check on those. They then do a lockup interview, getting demographic information about the actual arrestees. We also do a lockup drug test. And we gather all that information in order to run a risk assessment. We're looking in the risk assessment for two things: to assess the individual's risk of either failing to appear for future hearings or court dates, as well as any risk of rearrest. After we get that input, we will take all of the information that we've gotten from the risk assessment. It is a tool that supports our officers, and the officers will then make a decision and make recommendations to the court, specifically on whether those conditions that we feel will reasonably assure the court that if in place, this defendant will make every future court appearance and also not be rearrested. That report then goes to the court. We send those reports out to the prosecutor. We send those reports to the defense bar. We send that report to the judge. It's one of the pieces of information that the judge will consider. Prosecution gets to say and makes their recommendations, as well as the defense bar. They take that information, and for individuals, they can either be held before their trial or they can be released. For those individuals that are released, individuals can be released on a personal recognizance or released on conditions, what we sometimes will call PSA supervision. Those that are released on conditions can be released on either what it's called active conditions or passive conditions for PSA. The active condition, and right now they're released, for those that are released on PSA supervision, we have about 50-50 rate of those that are on active conditions versus those that are on passive conditions. Active conditions are those conditions that require you to have regular recurring contact with a pretrial services officer. That's important because for us, we feel that that's the best way that we have to be able to engage with the defendant and be able to influence behavior. There are those, however, that are just active conditions that can't necessarily be monitored, and we would then be dependent on another agency to let us know. An example of that condition would be a condition of do not drive. We would only know that condition was broken if the person was then again arrested while they were driving. We would then get that information and then have to report that up to the court. So that is the individuals or the way that people can get released. For those that then do get released onto PSA supervision, we have a couple of things that we do in the actual courthouse. We have a building where they have what we call a post-release meeting. Individuals that are leaving the courthouse will go into a room at the courthouse C301 where we have our release services teams. Our PSOs meet with the individuals that have been recently released to make sure that they understand what exactly has been ordered, to provide them information on how they can comply, make sure that they understand, and to connect them with provide contact information for who their actual pretrial services officer is going to be. After being released from the courthouse, for those that have been active or gotten active supervision, within about 24 to 48 hours, they will have a report for a supervision orientation. This is where they meet with the pretrial services officer. They establish what the requirements are going to be, what the reporting is going to be, and when they get the chance to go ahead and build the report, that's when we go ahead and start doing any referrals to mental health services, or by the court, or deemed necessary and or substance abuse assessments, which we do as well. And that works. The other thing they do is meet with the defendants to proactively work on any barriers to being compliant with actual supervision. There's a couple of different teams that they could be assigned to within supervision. We have an electronic monitoring team. We have a team that has and does specialized supervision that works with defendants and may have some mental health issues. We have a traffic safety supervision team for a lot of the DUI cases. We have a team that specifically works with the district court and federal defendants, and all of our officers also do and work with other supervision officers for agencies, for those that are under full supervision. So if we have an individual who has supervision in either Virginia, other supervision within the district, or in Maryland, our options then to work with and coordinate those requirements so that as we're reporting to the court, any of the compliance with the conditions, we're also reporting on how they're doing in the compliance that the individual has with the other agencies as well. In addition to those things, we have what's called a Social Services and Assessment Center. Those are the individuals that we have, some of our clinical services sessions where they are working to assess whether there's a need for services. Again, that can be a court order or because an individual requested it or a PSO, pretrial services officer, identified through the engagement that they might be in need. Whenever those things are ordered, we do in some cases either provide treatment and or refer out individuals depending on their risk level for services as well. When we have court orders for mental health treatment and or other treatment, we also work to ensure that we're coordinating with those treatment providers so that we can provide information support as well as to whether or not the individual is being compliant with those conditions as well.
Right, I have just a couple of clarification questions. So I heard you say that the court makes the decision about whether someone should be released pre-trial.
Correct.
But PSA has an opportunity to make recommendations, but you're not recommending whether the person should be released. What is it specifically that you are recommending?
So, based on the assessment, we give the court within what we call the PSR, the Pretrial Services Report, a detailed report that talks about the individual's criminal history, their background information, any compliance that they may have on any open case. But then we also provide recommendations for whether if they release the individual, what other recommendations that we feel need to be in place to make sure that we mitigate any of the risks that were assessed to either failing to appear or being rearrested. So we're making the recommendations to the court. Again, that's one piece of the input that the court is considering. As I mentioned earlier, the prosecution also gets to say, as well as the defense bar, will get to say, and the court ultimately makes a decision on what it orders. And pretrial then works on that very specific ground of authority on the release order to monitor and supervise whatever conditions the court has ordered.
And then can you give us a sense, what are some of the types of conditions, typical conditions that a court would order for a pretrial defendant?
So as I mentioned, we always recommend and like to have a reporting condition so that we can have that recurring contact, work with the defendants to try to make sure that they're in compliance. So there is reporting conditions, there's conditions to stay away from a location, they happen, they're staying away from witnesses and or others. There's also conditions to not fraud in some cases, do not fraud conditions in some cases, there's electronic monitoring conditions. There are court order conditions for individuals to maintain mental health treatment as well.
Then my last question before we go to Mr. Hodges, you said you conduct a risk assessment. What are you assessing? What is the risk that you're assessing? The risk that they would do what?
Right, so it looks at two things. One, the risk of failing to appear. So risk of failing to appear at future court dates, as well as any risk of rearrest that there might be. And then the recommendations are those conditions that we feel would mitigate that risk.
And so what is it in your risk assessment that could indicate whether someone may be more likely to get rearrested?
So we have an independent, scientifically validated risk assessment that we've been working for years. The latest version came out in 2015. It looks at 43 different factors across 5 domains. Criminal history is one, history with the criminal justice system, drug test results are one, and then the, social and demographic information, tax community, all of those things get factored into this assessment. The other piece, again, is the information that you may already have in some cases. Because we also, so that is the model. In some cases, we'll have individuals that may already, supervision restrictions, but also have observed behavior information.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hodges, we're going to turn to you. Tell us about CJCC.
Follow that. So I think Mr. Davis grossly underestimated what he does. This is probably the premier pretrial agency in the country, and so I always am amazed at what you do every single day. So let me say this. First of all, on behalf of our director, Mr. Petitioner, and our deputy director, Ms. Simmons, I am honored to be here. Number one, I'm honored that you put this gathering together because I get to tell our story. And I am very proud of our story. The strength of CJCC is our people and our collaboration. That's the strength in what we do. And so I know that because if you will, those who are live streaming, if you look around this room, or my CJCC colleagues stand up, please. And the reason why I did that is this. I am honored to work with a staff that is committed in not only changing people's lives, but are also committed in protecting the public, saving communities, fewer victims. That's our laser focused commitment on it. So what is CJCC and what do we do? Well, CJCC is a federal agency with a distinct local mission. And that local mission is the supervision of adult offenders in Washington, D.C. Adult offenders. We do not do juvenile. We have 2 releasing authorities. We have the D.C. Superior Court, and we work through a judgment and commitment order that gives us conditions of how we supervise those people in D.C. Superior Court. We also have our supervised release and our parole population, the United States Parole Commission. And so they give us notice of action. So we have conditions, whether it's from the court or from the U.S. Parole Commission, on how we supervise adults in D.C. We do that very proactively. We do that very aggressively, and we do that with a couple things in mind. Number one, we are trying to instill hope and trust in people who don't have hope and trust. People where a system has not only dealt them a wrong deal at times, but they're not trustful of the system. So we're trying to meet people where they are proactively to get the results that we want. And our aggressive approach that we want fewer victims, and we want safer communities. So none of us are soft on crime. But we try to meet people where they are so they can be successful citizens, that we create these safe communities, and where everybody can live in a just, equitable world. That's what we're looking for. So how do we do that? Man, I'll tell you what, I have 10 minutes, and I don't know if I can be able to explain all we do in 10 minutes, but I will tell you this. From starting supervision, we focus on one thing. And while some people may jump to assess, we jump to stabilization. If people are hungry and people are homeless, they ain't listening to what you buy. They ain't gonna listen to what you're trying to sell. So we have to really work on stabilizing individuals, whether it's through housing, whether it's through food, because food insecurity is real, nutrition is real. We try to stabilize and then we assess. All right, but let me back up. When we get a case from, let's say, the USPC, we have a transitional report that's all about reentry. And we try to re-enter the person starting when they're in the Bureau of Prisons. So it's not like they day to get out. 6 months out, we are working with our case, working with our collaborative partners, which I'll talk about in a minute, of trying to get the best avenue for this person to succeed. So the person just doesn't come on my doorstep and we say, you're here, we're going. Through our transitional reports, we are working that case. We're working while they're in the Bureau of Prisons to create a plan for them to be successful. A housing plan, a supervision plan. Once that person is received in our office, we have a reception place. And when we come to our intake center, we do assessments. And we stabilize, we do assessments, and then our case is assigned to an officer. I will tell you, our assessment tool looks at a lot of factors. We look at risks and needs, but we also have a concept called Data Plus. And that's the intelligence, any other information you need that's beyond the risk needs assessment. So we get a good assessment of all of them after we stabilize. Then they're assigned to an officer. I will tell you, our officers do 85% of their contacts in the community. They are community supervision officers. I don't believe in fortress probation, meaning people come to you. We go to the national environment. So now we get to build relationships with families, friends, husband, wife, because it takes a village, it takes a community to try to make people better. We know we can't do it alone. So our contacts are done in the community. So we're meeting with them, we're stabilizing them, we're assessing them, and then we're giving them a supervision plan. I like to call it a success plan, but it's a supervision plan, but that plan is shared. So it's this, it's not us dictating to people on what you need, because we know dictation doesn't work. How can we have a shared plan where we get their buy-in, they have our buy-in, and we come with a shared plan that can lead to success? For me, building rapport and building relationships with the people under supervision is the key to our success. And also do a great job in doing just that. So when we have that pace, we're assessing risk. If there's a substance use issue, there is an assessment, and we can make a determination for inpatient or outpatient treatment. I am big in the cognitive behavioral strategies. Let's get into thinking errors, the mistakes that we made. So we do a lot of COG programs in this city that has a lot of violence. Trauma and grief is real. So we do trauma and grief. And it's probably not a program that we don't offer across this country. We have every program for people if they choose to be successful. We're highly specialized. And so what Mr. Davis talked about, we have a domestic violence team. We have teams that specialize in sex offenders. We have teams that specialize in TAP, drug and alcohol. I have an interstate conflict unit. So we have a HIS team, which is a high intensive supervision teams that really work on high risk clients. And when I'm talking about high risk, I mean people A, prone to commit a violent act, or B, be subject to a violent act. So we have specialized teams for that provide an integrated model of supervision on what we do. So we try to meet people where we are and really try to create pathways for our clients to succeed. Now, I'll tell you two things that I really am proud about in our agency. And I was trying to 10 minutes ago to do it, but I got to tell you these two things. The one thing we created that I love the most is we created a rapid engagement team. We created a team probably about 5 years ago. And you look around at corrections, everybody has a rapid response team. And a rapid response team is not the team we want. We want a team that can go engage non-compliant clients and try to engage to get them back on supervision in a proactive manner. Meaning if people are missing treatment, if people are missing their officer, if people are walking out of programs, as soon as we know, we engage. So it's kind of swift and certain. And so what we discovered that when there's non-compliance, if we can get that non-compliance as fast as possible, then we have great success in making that person compliant. If someone is non-compliant and you wait weeks, and you wait 2 weeks, and you wait 3 weeks, then that person still got a non-compliant trail, and it could create to a victim or that person being victimized. So we have a very aggressive unit that goes out and deal with strictly non-compliance, but not to go out and knock on the door and beat people down, but to instill hope and trust and say you can do it, to support it, things like that. And they work Monday, all the way to Saturday. I mean, they work all the time just to engage people where they are. So that's our rapid engagement team. The second thing we created is this thing called engagement and intervention centers. And basically, if you know anything about probation control, it's that old day report to the bottom. And we deal with this at the highest of the high risk group and try to engage. And in this program, not only do we have an integrated model of supervision, where we add treatment, intervention specialists, we add community supervision officers, all working together to try to transform lives. And so this integrated model has worked very well with that. And we started the program during COVID, because when COVID started and things shut down, we had to find a different way to engage with our clientele, especially for those that are high risk. And we created those engagement and intervention centers. And I'll tell you a story, because I think this story goes to what we do. There was a client who just graduated from the cognitive behavioral program. Graduated, and when people graduate, we celebrate success. And so the person graduated from the program, and we're at the graduation, and I just happened to be there. And he's there with his mother. And the mom's happy, he's happy, and says, you know what, he always wanted to drive truck. He wanted a CDL license. And so talk to staff, because we have a vocational program. And over at the desk, you'll see our Hire One campaign, and we'll probably talk about that later on. But you want to drive a truck. So we set up an interview for him, like 2 Wednesdays with this company that was going to train him on the CDL license and things like that. Well, interview sets up. Does he show up? No, he doesn't show up. Now, I will tell you in the past, I'm just being perfectly honest with you, in the past, we probably would have said, you know what? Move on to the next. He didn't show up, he didn't want it, move on to the next. Our supervision model now, we went out, we went to his house and took the interview. He was late to the interview, but he still got the job. He still got a CDL license. So I believe in slip and service. So we had these groups on Saturday, and we had groups on Saturday. He was happening to be there. And for some reason, it was late, I was there too. And I asked a simple question. Why didn't you go? Why didn't you show up? Why did we have to come get you? And he looked at me and he says, you want to know why? I said, yes, I want to know why. Anybody knows me, I wasn't, probably being very aggressive at the time. But anyway, that's not silly. So I said, I want to know why. He said, I'm going to tell you why. Do you know how many times systems, people in your system have told me things and never followed through? Do you know how many times I've been told people are going to do something and they didn't do it? And this is the first time that it happened. And the lesson for me was simply this. If we say we want to do it, we have to do it. If we can't, then we say we can't. And so for me, it's how we build trust in a system, because we are a supervision agency. And people sometimes are distrustful of what we do. How can I build trust and hope in the people that can lead to better lives? And do it in a way that creates fewer victims, like I said before, that creates safer communities and reduce recidivism. And that's what we're really about in a nutshell. But let's back up. We are aggressive in our supervision approach. And so what I mean, so when people do violate, and there are people who will violate, they do violate, we write alleged violation for support. And we are very aggressive in that manner as well. So my point is, I believe in a balanced supervision approach. While I say I want people to be successful, while I say I want to create pathways of hope, of trust, and all that, I also am laser focused on public safety. And our staff do a great job in that. So that's the strength of our staff, CISO as our people, but I also say they're always about collaboration. We couldn't do what we do without Lamar, Carey, and Morgan. Couldn't do it. Anytime we have a person getting out and there's a housing need or there's other needs, we can call Lamar, Carey, and Morgan, and things happen. We couldn't do it without Chief Smith and NBD. I can't do it without DBH. We can't do it without the one's office. So the strength of our supervision in the nation's capital is our people, our staff, but our outstanding collaboration. And also couldn't do it without the CJCC, who brings all of us together to really improve the District of Columbia. So there you go.
That's a great point to end on. No, I appreciate that. So, we want to make sure everyone understands the nuts and bolts. So when we talk about pretrial, say the person goes through the system, they are convicted and they are sentenced, and the judge can sentence them to incarceration. The judge can sentence them to probation, which is community supervision. You supervise in general, I know it's a little more complex, but in general, you supervise probation, parole, supervised release. Can you help folks understand the difference between those two things? What is, maybe probation is understood. What is supervised release?
Yeah.
What is parole?
It's really simple. Probation is not a DC Superior Court. It's really simple. And so probation comes from DC Superior Court, and we did a JNC, a judgment committee order for that. When you talk about parole and supervised release, you're talking about someone who probably was in the Bureau of Prisons, who served time and is coming out of incarceration, not jail, out of incarceration. I mean, it could be a jail sentence if it was 12 months or something like that, but they're just two releasing authorities that we work with for our cases. So it's really that simple.
Okay, and then I'm getting some feedback. If we could all maybe hold our mics up closer to the mouse.
Okay.
So we heard that on the pretrial end, there's a risk assessment that's done, and that risk assessment is to determine are they, likelihood of showing up to court, likelihood of getting rearrested. You all do a risk assessment. What risk are you assessing?
So the risk of recidivate, and the risk of the violence. So that's the difference is, I mean, so the difference between pre-trial and what we do, ours is really the risk to recidivate or to commit a crime, basically. So we use an instrument called the Darius and Dreyer. It's about a fifth generation tool. It's probably the most state-of-the-art risk assessment in the country that we have. Because not only does it do risk and needs, it does the thing called protective factors. And I'm not going to get you all the science into it, but I do want to tell you why protective factors are important. So here you go. You look at risk tool, and you say individuals high risk. He's high risk. And when you look at risk, you're looking at age first. Age is the first predictor of risk. Age and when was your first arrest? Those are two big predictors of risk, or in the amount of crime that you can do, the violent crime that you did. So really three factors there. So you can have that. So you can have a 19-year-old who comes from supervision, and that's all that you look at, it would say they were high risk. But there are other things that goes on, because we have 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds who are getting college education, who have a stable home, a stable family, and everything else. They just got caught up in the system a little bit, got caught in the streets a little bit. That doesn't mean they're high risk, because they have these protective factors to show that their risk of recidivate is lower. So with these protective factors, we can use an individualized risk tool, use those protective factors, but they work two ways. You can have the one that may be a nonviolent crime, but is homeless and needs are skyrocketing, has no place to stay, has low education, so that protective factor may drive their risk up. And so what we try to do with our risk needs tool, when you use Darius and Dreyer, is to individualize tools, but the best thing about that is the protective factors, because it really allows us to hone into what people need.
Okay. And then, we talked about the court sets the conditions of release for pretrial. Who's setting the conditions for your populations? And do you have any control over what the individual has to do, or is that entirely sort of the releasing authority?
We can make recommendations, especially when we use our pre-sentence report and our test reports. We can make recommendations, but once again, if you're talking about a JNC, DC Superior Court, the courts will set those conditions. And if you're talking about supervised parole, the United States Parole Commission sets those conditions. But we can make recommendations, and we do. But the court ultimately decides, or the United States Parole Commission ultimately decides.
So now I'm going to ask questions of both of you. You've talked about this idea of compliance, and that's compliance with those conditions that are set. So can you each share what's your current level of compliance? To what extent are the people you're supervising complying with the conditions? And then when they don't comply, what are your options? So I'll start with you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you. So, I mean, currently, the individuals that we supervise, and this is, last 5 fiscal years, we've had, a population that has been arrest-free, 90%. So, mostly compliant. When we have cases that are non-compliant, we have graduated sanctions that we implement really based on risk. For those that are on the lower end of the risk spectrum, we will usually give more of the administrative sanctions, trying to get the individual to get back into compliance. We will work with, as Mr. Hodges mentioned, those collateral contacts, right? While we were trying to have meaningful contacts with the individual mentioned in the beginning, we were also working and collecting information on who's the brother, mother, sister, that were those collaterals, who's the defense attorney, who will work with in conference with those individuals whenever there's non-compliance to try to bring them individuals back into compliance. Conversely, when we have individuals that are very high risk or we have egregious non-compliance, we will immediately, report those things to the court. We can, in some cases, request a warrant be issued, and or up to recommending a revocation of the release of the individual within the minimum.
Let's hope, Mr. Hodges, what's your compliance rating?
Now, this is where it gets tricky, so you'll stay with me on this, all right? So, we have a 60% compliance rate, I mean successful completion, 60%. And so you're talking about 40% who are unsuccessful. Now, you gotta pay attention. Unsuccessful does not mean a return to prison. Unsuccessful can mean a revocation in which the court or the USPC just restores someone back to supervision to give them another bite of the apple. I mean, and so we have technical violations and we have other violations, so we have 60% of people complete, 40% that can be unsuccessful, but that unsuccessful, most of the time, have been placed back on supervised probation or back on supervised release, not a revocation to prison. So when you think about that, 8% of our people are revocated back to Bureau of Prisons, only 8%. And so to say all of that, yes, we have people that get many bites of the apple because we hold people accountable. So if we do an alleged violation report for non-compliance, there is a hearing. Whether it's with the USPC or it's with the courts, there is a hearing. And the determination is made by them what to do. So what I'm telling you, in most cases, if it's technical in nature, and technical means that it wasn't due to law offense, this didn't show up, they absconded from supervision, meaning their whereabouts were unknown and things like that, they were probably placed back on supervision, but it still counts as unsuccessful. I mean, so when you hear that numbers like that, people normally say, oh my God. No, it doesn't mean, because only 8% are actually returned back to Bureau of Prison as a revocation. Is that clear?
I've got it.
All right, that's good.
So I want to, and this is a touchy issue. So I think last year, as the DC Council was initially considering the legislation that has now become the Omnibus Secure DC bill, there was a narrative that a lot of the violent crime in the city is being driven by individuals who are under supervision. And so each of you has shared your overarching compliance rate. You shared your arrest-free rate, but you're talking about all types of arrests, and not necessarily violent crime arrests. So would you all be able to tell us what proportion of your populations have been arrested for violent crime? And then how do you respond to sort of this narrative that it's the folks under supervision driving violent crime? So sorry.
So as you know, Kristy, the facts just don't show that. When we look at the data for last year, less than 2% were arrested for violent crime. And when we were talking about, and I think one of the things that were mentioned were individuals, you know, that were unreleased from violent crime, that got rearrested. That was like 1.2% of the individuals that got rearrested. The numbers just don't bear those facts out.
Okay.
I'm gonna say the same. I would say this. We can be an easy target. I'm just gonna be real with you for a second. But when we look at our numbers, I mean, our numbers are very similar to pretrial numbers of those people committing violent crimes. I can tell you that we've had people who have successfully completed supervision and successfully completed, and maybe years later, they're involved in a crime. I can tell you that. And people say, well, Marcus, why is that happening? They were under supervision. You had them, they were compliant and doing things well, and you had them, and then they're gone, and they're not. Well, there are many factors to that. Many factors to that. And if I give you the demographics of the population that we're dealing with, because you gotta understand, our supervision period on average is 18 to 36 months tops, or sometimes even 18 to 45 months. And so I'm getting people with no education, because 50% don't have high school diploma or GED. I'm getting people who have no job skills. I'm getting people who have unstable housing, no high school diploma or GED. We have a lot of things to do in a short period of time. Now, I am not an advocate for longer probation terms to fix that. I'm not. What I'm telling is that we have individuals that we work with on a day-to-day basis to improve them and be where they are. And so we get that, and I wish if there was a magic pill or a statement I could use or a tool I can use that once you go through supervision, you are crime free. If I had that, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I just can't figure that out. But for us right now, our numbers are relatively low, and I understand why people say that, because we can be an easy target for what we do every day, but the numbers just don't line up.
Okay, I'm going to pause with my questions and see if we have any questions from those in the audience. And we have a mic, one of the team could help pass the mic so we can offer your questions. That'd be great. And, we'll start with you here in the front.
Thank Thank you so much. Thank you for those informative presentations. I have one interest, and it has a number of questions, all of them related, and I'm gonna keep it quick because I saw other hands. As everybody on this panel knows, returning citizens, returning residents to DC are over 100 times likely to overdose and die. I did not have a chance to prepare for this meeting as I wanted, just my schedule, but I read before coming, and I'd love to be corrected on this, that CSOS actually doesn't keep statistics on people who die of overdose deaths while under their supervision. I find that hard to believe, is such a crucial point of intervention. So I guess my first question is that true? Is that still the case, or is that dated information? And then all the other questions have to do with, when you go to the Bureau of Prisons 6 months before, are you assessing and providing medication-assisted treatment for vulnerable people? When you perform that risk assessment, are you also performing an overdose assessment or a substance use disorder assessment? Are there wraparound services for our returning citizens? As everybody knows, Washington, DC has one of the highest rates of overdose fatalities in the country. This is an ongoing multi-year struggle, and returning citizens are among the most vulnerable because they tend to be opioid naive and they're not prepared for the drugs that are on the streets right now. So what are we doing in the face of this tremendous vulnerability and all of our returning citizens who are so vulnerable to this issue? Thanks.
That is a great question, and that is the emerging issue. So let me take it in parts. Yes, I have data galore, cover everything. I mean, we have the data. That's number one. Number two, we do comprehensive substance abuse assessments. Number three is we're looking at doing more medically assisted treatment, because that's important. So we have a reentry and sanction center that we work closely with the jail to do that. But we're also looking at trying to really expand medically assisted treatment for our population. And so we're working with that too. It's something that we saw a couple of years ago that is emerging, and not only emerging, we've been looking at, I'm talking about opiates and fentanyl. We've been watching that trend for about the last 5 years. And it's funny you say that, because we thought that we would be hit 5 years ago, and we're making essence plans to do that, and now it's here. I mean, so we're trying to be really aggressive in our supervision strategies, very aggressive in our assessment. And so for us, you will see us really get into the medically assisted treatment world with hopefully with a vendor and an RFP that we're going to do for residential. We do have residential programs for substance abuse. But goes back to, I'm very pleased with the amount of assessments that we do and how we do them and the earlier that we do. And I think we do a good job in partnering with the jail and others. But it's emerging, and we're really trying to stay out in front of it. But that was, I hope I answered your question. That was a great question. And if I didn't, please jump in.
I think it would be helpful for Mr. Davis to address this too, because in our PSA, your role in drug court and also testing and treatment that.
Right. So while we don't do necessarily return citizens, we do have comprehensive substance use disorder assessments that we do provide both residential as well as intensive outpatient treatment. We do support the drug court as well, and we have been we work closely with ONDCP, and recently, because of all of the overdose deaths as well, we just recently also had training for the staff and have Narcan on site as well, just in case something ever happens.
There's a question, someone in the back.
Yes, thank you for allowing us to ask these questions. My question was about the compliance that you talked about earlier. So the question centers around the high compliance rate, and you mentioned that many of the offenders that you are supervising are risk-free. I'm wondering how many of those people are low-risk offenders? What percentage of your population is low risk? And for those who are low risk and compliant, Is there any sort of mechanism for them to terminate their supervision early without a lawyer or you all putting in a petition?
It's- In terms of early terminations.
That's me. So there is a mechanism for them to do early termination. For the most part, we go through the courts to do that. When I think of a supervision model, I think for us that when you start here and you start gaining success, we back you out the door, so you go medium, down to low, and then get all supervision. And so that's what we try to do. I will also tell you that I don't want to over supervise. So when the supervision completion period is done and we can do no more, I just don't want to keep you. I mean, so when we have those cases that have factors and we've made recommendations, our office has made recommendations to do early termination for people who have benefited from supervision. And so when people have had max benefit, it doesn't benefit me or the agency to keep people on. I mean, so when an officer knows that, then we've made recommendations to early termination to them all supervision.
But, so I guess my question a little bit further is, when I say mechanism, is there any sort of like credit, sort of like in the BOP system that people can get towards early termination? I know when I was reading your manual on the STAR program, there was some sort of earned compliance credit, and I'm wondering if that applies to all people who are under supervision.
Not right now for us. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I know there's emerging work of time, earned time of things that you've done in prison, to supervision. We haven't done that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from those in the room? Oh, go ahead.
Hello, well, actually, since I'm standing up already, let me try and gather the thoughts for a second. I guess my question largely has to do with, the glaring gap between law enforcement and then all of this stuff. So I appreciate everyone in this room, I think, is oriented towards the same goal. Can I ask actually this question? Is anybody currently a law enforcement officer? Raise your hands. Oh, okay, cool. No. The reason I ask is more to do with how people end up in the system to begin with, and the lengthy, extremely lifelike of the inordinate burdens that occur in all of the pre-trial period. So we're talking months, and we're talking a very complicated legal process in which there are 29 different law enforcement agencies that all have arresting and then, let's say, law enforcement power and discretion in various jurisdictions, and it's an entirely complicated web that I will say, from personal experience, can attest is extremely abusive, or can be, and largely is at the discretion of individual officers, and then, the question is here, the risk assessment to begin with, there's a large focus on, let's say, I guess the distinction here between criminalization of substance use versus decriminalization and all of these things, because they're all interconnected. So most of the people end up in the system or something, or every time you're arrested, you're asked to give a urine sample. If for nonviolent offenses or things that are otherwise irrelevant for, why an invasive biological test that's performed only under the, kind of jurisdiction of law enforcement at their discretion to even be the very pretense for what you end up having to then serve all of this time for, and so
Sure.
that's, yeah.
Thank you. No, I appreciate your questions. I will say that neither of the agencies represented here can control who does and does not enter the criminal justice system. Law enforcement makes an arrest, the prosecutor decides they're going to charge the court, case in court. That's how PSA gets its clients, and then a judge has sentenced an individual, and that individual is released from BOP, and that's how CJCC gets their clients. So neither agency has control over who enters the system. I don't know if you want to talk anything about urine testing.
I will mention, and I mentioned earlier that, but I didn't say this earlier, but the urinalysis, the lack of drug tests that I think you're referring to, and you mentioned as well, is actually a voluntary urinalysis.
Drug recognition expert in the entire metropolitan PD, the Capitol Police and Department. One drug recognition expert for all 29 agencies. Not a single other officer has been licensed for years. There is one single officer. There is a glaring gap of recognition by law enforcement officers as to substances to begin with, when they have nothing to do with a crime, or if they are, let's say, they're tangential to any material fact that led to an arrest. Why is there such a heavy prevalence and focus on on toxicological result one time at time of arrest by officers, leading to years-long repercussions that then ultimately don't address substance use for those who are critically at most risk? There's a difference between substance use and abuse. The risk assessment seems to miss all of it. And there are no officers that are recognized to even be able to offer a clinical or scientific approach, as you said. So I'm here listening to you about risk assessment, and I can't stop thinking that the process is flawed from the very start, and all of this is band-aids and reparations done after the fact. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, we don't have, in terms of the police represented here, so in terms of what you're saying, not enough officers, there's probably not a conversation that we're able to have here, but I appreciate your comment and something for us to keep in mind.
So I'm just gonna cover this, and I understand the young lady disagrees. For the lack of testing, the Pretrial Services Agency conducts is a voluntary drug test. We do have 95% of people agree to and take the test. There are some that deny it and don't take the test, which is fine as well. It does help us identify those that may need an evaluation and or a substance use disorder assessment. And when that is identified, we do recommend and at times provide treatment. But again, treatment is something that has to be voluntary as well. So sometimes treatment is recommended and not taken, but it is something that helps us identify when there could be a need as well.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder for those of us, those joining us online, feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, and those will be shared with me. I want to ask another question, maybe a little sticky. So again, last year in particular, we were hearing a number of stories of someone who was arrested for a violent crime, and while they were wearing a GPS device. Can you all talk to us about how is it even determined whether someone you're supervising will be placed on GPS? And then what's the nature of your GPS monitoring? Do you have someone watching that person where they go 24/7? So how do you determine who gets a GPS, and what does GPS monitoring look like?
So for us, GPS condition has to be ordered by a judge. They're the ones who order that condition. It is best used to monitor things like a curfew, a house arrest, and or a stay away location. That way you can monitor where the individual is, and in different places it's been called location monitoring. Let you know exactly where the individual is, whether they are where they're supposed to be or not. It's not an agency monitored 24/7. It's a contractor that provides the equipment and has the monitoring based on the information into our system. In some cases, that information also has to be verified. We then coordinate and provide information if we get information that there is a violation to either the court, or in some cases to the court and law enforcement, depending on the nature of violation.
So GPS is a supervision tool. And for so long, people think GPS stop people from committing crimes. Well, GPS is super true. I mean, there have been cases throughout the country where people have done violent acts and other acts with GPS on their ankle. I mean, so it's just that, it's a tool. And so we had a ruling about a couple months ago, it was called the Davis ruling from the DC Court of Appeals, that really changed how we utilize GPS. Prior to the Davis ruling, we used GPS as a supervision tool for non-compliance, not to exceed 90 days. So we placed people on GPS for 90 days, for non-compliance. That means there was a document non-compliance to our officer. We placed individuals on GPS for that time period, and then we took it off. With this ruling, we don't have authority to do it anymore. So we have to be, it has to be a condition, either from the United States Parole Commission, or it has to be a condition from the courts. So it has to be a condition added to the NOA, the USCC, or it has to be a condition on the J&C. For GPS. So it really changed how we use GPS. But once again, I will stress, it is just a supervision tool. That's what it is, and that's how we use it. And we use it, even with the new way we do it, it will still just be a tool to aid in the supervision process. That's all it is.
And what's your monitoring look like? Is that 24/7? Is a probation officer gonna get an alert in the middle of the night that their person on GPS has gone into a place that they're not supposed to?
We have a rap engagement team. We will get that alert, and we also have a contractor that's watching too. So we have a little bit of everybody watching that tool in that system. And the main thing is if we have non-compliance with that, then we are very aggressive in figuring out what that non-compliance is with that. So not only do we have a contractor we work with, we also have our rap engagement team monitor that too. And we also have a distinct GPS unit within CSOSA is looking. So we have eyes on tracks all the time.
And then you've both previously talked that you have high compliance rates, low rearrest rates. Maybe it's no more than 2% of your supervisees are being arrested for new violent crime. However, when you take a look at those who were arrested for new violent crime, what was the situation? Are you seeing any commonalities? Like, is it those who have had an underlying offense that was a violent crime that tended to commit the new violent crimes? Or could it be any type of offender who you see getting rearrested for new violent crime? Do you see any patterns?
Well, we do similar reviews, so we look at every case like that, but to see what are those factors that determine that crime, that offense. I mean, there are a lot of guns in DC. I think I tell everybody on the streets that there's a lot of guns in DC, and we still are using firearms to set up disputes. I mean, and so we can do all these things. That dispute happens on the block. They're not using probably the power of the interventions. They're probably going to use the firearm. I mean, and so what we see is it's still a younger type client who they have an issue and they go to use the firearm, and because there are still a lot of guns in DC. I mean, so that's what we're seeing right now. And so for me, it's what strategies can we use to combat that? And that's why I'm really big in this whole notion of cognitive behavioral therapy, and deal with thinking reports, thinking errors, interacting journey, to find a different way when that dispute happens in the street, a different way to handle it other than fire.
What about Pearson?
Thank you, Kristy. So right, Marcus, we do second event reviews as well, and really look into the individual cases and touch points that we've had. But I think a couple of things. One, I think Marcus said on one, we do see a lot of younger individuals doing that. But I will hit on that question of, is it those that have had an underlying violent crime? And I will say that historically that is not the case. It's usually a lot more compliance for those that have been arrested. The compliance rate is actually pretty higher, and pretty high for those that have been arrested for a violent crime, usually. So,
Okay, that's an interesting insight. I appreciate that. So I didn't say this at the start, but I talked about DC has a unique criminal justice system. We have this hybrid of local and federal agencies. Both PSA and CSOS are federal agencies. Are there any benefits that you've experienced because of our unique structure here in the district? And are there any challenges that you've experienced because of our hybrid structure? I'm going to start with Mr. Hodges this time.
Well, let me say this, no matter what system you go, whether you go to Virginia, Maryland, they all different. And you may have similarities, it's all different. And the elephant in the room is we have federal, but then we have local. And, for me, and I talked about earlier on, it's our collaboration with DC partners. And just because we're federal, we don't collaborate. I mean, and so at the end of the day, it's all of us working together seamlessly. I mean, so no matter what we are, we're working seamlessly to really provide a better DC. And so our collaboration, we can do that in the vacuum, and we don't do it in the vacuum. So our collaboration with DC partners has been tremendous and outstanding. It continues to grow. We have people embedded not only in law enforcement, but we have people who've been embedded in social service type things. So whether it's ones or anything else, for us working collaboratively. So while it is different, I think the benefit is our collaboration. And I will say one thing about this city is the services that it offers in a collaborative way. It's very interesting to see it's the nation that has it. And so that's why I really push our collaboration. And as an agency, we collaborate with everyone.
So I would agree with Marcus. We frequently get visitors from other states and other jurisdictions looking to either improve or create a new pretrial services program. And one of the biggest hurdles at times that they have is getting their partners on board, which is something that is not a hurdle here. I think, the CJCC does a great job of bringing all the partners to the table. And that is the problem that you see and hear about again and again from other jurisdictions. But we have, at the table, all of the other law enforcement agencies, all of the other partners. We have the prosecutors, we have the defense bar, we have the judges. They're all sitting at the table, working together, trying to figure out how do we get through any barriers and the problems to overcome them. So that's that.
Thank you. And you, Ms. Hodges, you talked a bit about success. And, you have 60% that complete successfully. Doesn't mean they're going back to prison. But what are the markers? Like, what does supervision look like for someone who's on the road to success? What does that person do?
See, when you think about supervision, everybody uses the word recidivism. And I've said it a lot, but recidivism, if you think of the alphabet, is Z. And there's a lot of numbers, A, B, C, D, all in between. I am big into intermediate measures, especially when you're dealing with someone who has a substance abuse issue. They go from A to Z. There is a process. When you have people who are dealing with high criminality and common distortions, there is a process. So what we try to do is we try to celebrate all the steps that lead to recidivism reduction. So it's a lot of intermediate measures. If you have a person that never showed up for supervision before, gone, and now they're showing up. Well, that's success. And so for me and our staff is to really not to get to Z and say what the recidivism rate is, but what are the intermediate measures along the process that could change people's lives and really stay focused on that stuff.
So for us, success is getting the individual through supervision, again, staying arrest-free, making every scheduled court date, and eliminating any barriers that we may have identified in the meantime to make sure that they can be compliant. In cases where we identified either a social service need that we made referrals and or connected the individual to make sure that we've addressed those as well.
You mentioned the prevalence of guns in the district, and that's one statistic that CJCC tracks, looking at the number of guns, illegal guns that MPD confiscates on a monthly basis. And year after year, that number has gone up. So in one way, it's good that we're getting those guns off the street, but it's a bit alarming to see that number gets higher and higher. What are each of your agencies doing to try to prevent your population from engaging in gun violence?
That's a loaded question because apparently, if you look over the last couple of years, we've only got good. But I will tell you, it's really trying to create different pathways for people and trying to meet people where they are. And so we have very innovative strategies. I talked about our vocational program. And so when you're able to take an 18-year-old who's never had a job before and they can get a certification in all kinds of different jobs, and all kinds of careers. That leads to careers, not just, back in the day, you told somebody to get a job at McDonald's and you expect because they got employed, they were gonna do it. Well, they didn't keep a job at McDonald's. None of us would keep a job at McDonald's. But when you start talking about leading to careers, you start to create different pathways. I'm trying to meet people where they are and create these pathways for them. So our vocational program has been outstanding. But the weirdest thing that we've done, and people think I'm crazy when I say this, is we created this Easy Street Music Academy. And so Easy Street's local DJ, 96.3. And basically we did that because every one of our young population want to be rappers. And we ain't found one yet. We ain't found one yet. But what we're able to do is through music and the arts, really trying to create different pathways. So while we're in this academy, it's life skills going on, it's cognitive behavioral interventions going on, it's yoga, it's nutrition, it's food, it's all these things that they do, and they show up. Because with our population, I need them to show up. So if I meet them where they are, and if it's music and the arts, and they show up, we can work on the other stuff. So for us, it's really trying to create different innovative strategies to just simply get people to show up so we do the other things that we do. It is hard to tell you, put the gun down. And we can tell you that, and you'll say yes. And then you go back to the neighborhood for guns are preference. And so for me, if we can continue just to one person at a time, they can show something different. And people see that difference. And then it's two, and then it's three, and then it's four. If we can do it that way, I think we'll have success in that. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. And Kristy, so in addition to some of that work that he's talking about, as you know from the CJCC, we've also started doing work with MPD as well as the other partners, looking at events and at shootings, incidents, generally right after they happen, to see if we can identify those that might be at higher risk of retaliatory violence. And then, making sure that we are proactively engaging. And as Marcus mentioned, in some cases, not just actual supervision and or compliance, but additional resources that we then, and or avenues that individuals can take that we provide to individuals that we do and provide the most benefit. Just today with a resource fair that we shared with our agency. So just to be able to give and provide resources to those individuals that are under supervision, that in some cases are absolutely free and people just don't even know about it. So make sure they can take advantage of those, making sure that we're connecting folks and giving them what they need so they can either get a job and or find a different job.
And let me add, you brought some up, which I think is very important, is the intelligence work. So when we have a shooting that we're made aware of through our intelligence, what we try to do is look at the collaterals. And so there's not a quick shooting. And they'll check on our people and meet with our people and make sure that it's not going to be a repeat shooting or a retaliatory shooting. So when we have things like that and we're getting intel like that, we're constantly looking at the data, looking at the intelligence, looking at other factors there. And then if they are, we go out and try to engage with them so they don't retaliate.
Thank you. I'm gonna pause again and see if there are any questions.
I have a question. Do you have any relationship with violence interrupter programs? And if so, are you in a position to offer an opinion on how effective they are?
Great question. So we work with violence interrupters through the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement. We work with them. As far as for me to tell you if they're effective or not, I can't do that because I don't know. I know there have been data and instances where we work together to stop retaliatory shootings. I will tell you that. I know our partnership with the ones and working with the violence interrupters is something that has been beneficial not only to our clients, but also been beneficial to the community. I know there may be a study that's going on to study violence interrupters in the process of it. I know Chicago was doing a study. I don't know what DC is doing, but I know there are studies nationwide looking at the effectiveness of violence interrupters. For me, how we utilize them and how we get intel and work together and collaboratively working together, it seems to be working, but I can't tell out any data for you. So.
And just to confirm, there is a study underway, and I think it's looking at both ones, violence interrupters, as well as the OAG Cuba Street program.
What other governmental agencies are trying to address gun violence, like housing, transportation, parks? Like, what other agencies are working on trying to address gun violence, or is it only both federal or local? Is it only just the criminal justice systems that are trying to address it?
Well, for us, I mean, I said earlier, it's us, Morca, Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. We work with DBH, we work with everybody. We have local partners. We work with transitional housing, but sometimes people just need to get away and get out. I mean, so we partner with everyone, and I'm probably not doing it justice of all who we partner with, so I apologize for that. But we partner not only with the law enforcement community, but we partner with our neighborhoods. And I know we partner sometimes with ANCs that help people and things like that. So we partner with everybody. But it takes all of us.
Right, I was gonna mention DBH, that's a big partner, that we have.
We have a couple of questions that came in from the chat. So the first one is for Mr. Hodges, that you mentioned the Hire One program, and just wanted a bit more elaboration.
All right, so employment is important. It's not the factor, it's a multiple of factors. And so our director said, we're gonna do this Hire One campaign. So it's to hire one. But at the end of the day, the conversation was, how can we ask people to hire and we don't hire? So we went to our federal partners, and we hire people with records. We hire people with lived experience as records, and we had to hire them on the guys of credible messengers, and we use those credible messengers. But the goal was to hire them to train them, have all federal government training, so they can get other federal government jobs. And so our Hire One campaign is really that hire one, because we want you to hire one, but we also hire people with lived experiences, people that have records, people that have served time, and we hire them in the federal government working for CJCC. But the goal was for them not to be in CJCC. The goal was for them to get other federal employment and other things, but the people that we hired have been phenomenal. And so when I talk about these fire starters that can go back into the community and do great things, everyone we hire is either got on the DC government, who started their own business. We had people go through Georgetown Pivot Program, all because of our Hire One campaign. And so we're trying to reduce the stigma. Just because you're a felon, you can't work, or you're a stigma, the stigma that if you're a felon, that carries you for the rest of your life, you can't do certain things. We're saying, and we're stepping up to say Hire One, because it's a federal agency, which is kind of unheard of. We hire people with felons and records. So that's our Hire One thing.
Okay, and the next question, do your agencies have initiatives that are targeted towards the needs of women and those with special needs?
Specific initiatives for
women or persons with special needs?
we have, we do have, programs specifically for that. We also have and look at, when we do the assessment, those that have, because again, we have, throughout others, those with special needs, to make sure that they also have and that we're making everything, available, whether they have either a hearing deficit, we have individuals that are blind, we have individuals that are, on wheelchairs. So yes, we have programs for all of that.
Same here. We have gender responsibility, so we have the women's programs that really focus on women and the needs that they have, even with women and children. We do that, and we also have accommodations, reasonable accommodations for anyone with supervision. But we also have programs for transgender. I mean, so what we try to do is really humanize the supervision process. I mean, so we do it across the board.
Thank you. And one more question from the chat. How do you conduct community outreach? And do you work with NPD and others to inform the community about your work?
So yes, I mean, we do these types of public meetings. We do work with NPD every year. When NPD does Beat the Streets, we support that. We actually have our deputy assistant director for our community outreach office, day-to-day as well, so we try to get, as much information out into the community about what we do.
And I would say this, last year, we do everything through our associate director, Cedric Hendricks. So I'm gonna give him a shout out, he's sitting right there. We do outreach, we with NPD, and you'll see the CSO event, and you'll see us in the community. We do stuff with DBH, so once again, our rap engagement team, you can find them at any point, any day during the week, whether you got a tent up, especially in the summertime, because we are out there in the summertime, and we will engage, we've done things, and we do meet and greets, where we're just out in the community, where people can meet us and see us. And I'll be honest, I don't think we do enough. We do a lot, I don't think we do enough. I think the more we can engage in the community, the better we can be. And so I challenge our staff to continue to do more. And the more we do, the more we're seen, the more we're out there, the more we're helping, the more we're assisting, I think, goes well for me. I think probation supervision overall, and I just nationwide, we have to get out this thing where sometimes it's looked at as a secret service or as a misunderstood service. No one knows what we do. And I don't fault the community, I fault us. I mean, so that's why I love this today, because we get to tell our story. And I'll tell you, while we do great things, I know we know what we're good at, and we know what we need to work on. And I will tell this community, we are always working to get better. We're always working to get better because that's what we're charged to do.
Right. Then I have one more nuts and bolts question and turn it over and we may wrap up. So if I'm a pretrial defendant in a PSA supervision, what are my responsibilities? What does my engagement with my supervision officer look like? How often do I have to check in? How am I checking in? Do I have to go down to your office? If you come into my house, what is engagement with the officer?
So again, it really depends on what the court, has ordered, whether they've ordered in-person supervision, or sometimes, they will order supervision by phone. That will determine, again, because we work on a very specific grant of authority from the court, what that supervision looks like. Either way, whether it is in person or by phone, we try to make sure that every contact we have with this individual is meaningful. We want to make sure that we're going over what those expectations are, what the compliance has been since the last meeting, exactly what the next court date is, and working on any barriers that we may have, or that they think they have to compliance, to make sure that we're overcoming those barriers. Working to develop the relationship and build the rapport so that we know if the person does, for whatever reason, get off track, how do we get them back on track? Who are those people in their lives that are most effective at communicating with them? Is it their uncle? Is it their brother, their mother? Where is the defense attorney in that? We frequently work with, as I mentioned, what we call collateral contacts, to make sure that we are getting everybody who's involved with this individual on board and getting the same message to try to get that individual back into compliance.
So I'll ask a very specific question, because you said you help them address barriers. So say, you're trying to ensure people are getting to court. I don't have a car, and where I live isn't the greatest in terms of metro accessibility. What is something PSA can help us with?
So we try to make sure we understand exactly what the issue is, and then work on a plan, how it is that we're gonna get there. The one that you see a lot sometimes is, well, I have a kid and or childcare, and we will let them know the court has a childcare facility that's also available sometimes that you can use. We will give them options on different forms of transportation that they can take at times. And in some cases, it's letting and having that communication, letting us know when life has happened, so that in some cases, maybe a bench warrant doesn't get issued because the day that you had court, you found out that your kid had a treated feet and needed to go to the emergency. So making sure they're contacting the individual so that in court, we can have a representative say, this has happened, we've been in contact, let's continue the case for a day as opposed to issuing a warrant. So those sort of things, working with them again, to try to get them to supervision period without any arrest and making sure it's fine.
And then, of course, so what does the interaction look like with the probation officer? How are you engaging? Are you doing house checks? Is it through phone? Are they coming to your office?
All of the above, and based on risk level. So let's start from the highest. If you are in the tents max, there's a lot of contacts, there's a lot of community contacts. We use technology, so FaceTime, what's up, Skype, we can see you. So we do a lot of work in the community, we do a lot of work with collaterals, we do a lot of counting towards the NPD at the highest risk. We bring you in for groups, you can do group telehealth. So there is a lot of engagement, the higher the risk. As the risk goes down and you start becoming compliant or whatever, then those contacts back up some. So if you're compliant, then those contacts will lessen, but it's still a lot of community contacts and it's a lot of engagement to ensure compliance. And so I balance over supervision with effective supervision, meaning that we don't want to over supervise, but we want to effectively supervise so we can make people compliant and make people better to do the things that we want to do. So depending on the risk, a lot of contacts, and as the risk level drops, lesser contacts. And the goal really is to actually get you out the door where there's no contact. That's the goal. So if we start off high, the goal is to get you over down low where there is minimal to no contacts, because that supervision is not needed anymore. Max benefit.
A couple of more questions in the chat. So someone asked, can each of your agencies give monthly or quarterly reports to the Police Advisory Council that they can share with their communities?
Depends on what they're asking for. We share. I would entertain anything. I tell you, the strength is my collaboration. So I really know what they're asking for. There's a request to do that. And if we can do it, we can do it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have the teams that go out and meet, with the commanders in the district monthly, and we share information again on a regular basis, so yeah. What is the specifics of being asked?
And then I just want to give you all a shout out. I think we've inspired a couple of people online because they've asked how can they apply to work for PSA or CSO. So
look, we're always hiring, and we're always hiring. Yeah, just let us know. We're always hiring. We're in social media and everything like that. We're just having a CSO Academy and things like that. And we're always looking for people. And I always, what I look for, people say, well, Mark, you look for? I look for people who intrinsically believe people can change. We can do everything else, but if you don't believe people can change, it's a job for you. And we do that in a proactive, public safety manner, but it has to be a belief that you believe people can change, and you can be a conduit for change.
okay. All right. Well, I promised you that you were going to be able to get a bite to eat before maybe tuning into the State of the Union. I'm going to hold to that. So I just want to thank Mr. Victor Valentine Davis, Mr. Marcus Hodges, PSN and Sosa. You all have been great partners for the CJCC. Many of you know that the Secure DC legislation has required CJCC to report a lot of data. And I will say that our federal partners aren't under the jurisdiction of council. They have been very generous with the information that they've shared with us so that we can continue to inform the public about what's going on with adult pretrial and post-conviction supervision. So thank you all for your continued partnership. Thank you for your participation this evening. To those who joined us, thank you so much for offering us your time. We hope that you benefited from this. Please take some time to fill out the survey for those of you in person. And if you're also in the room, please scan the QR code so that we know who you are and if you want to join our distribution list. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening.
Good job. Amen.